One of the largest and most important impacts of the sexual revolution has been its normalization of pornography. Today, both hard and softcore internet pornography is ubiquitous in today's society. It's on internet tube sites, it's on internet and television advertisements, and it's even in our mainstream movies and TV shows. It is nearly impossible to escape it. Estimates of pornography use vary due to recall bias and other issues, but a paper published in the Journal of Sex Research, which attempted to grapple with these difficult statistical issues, found 46% of men and 16% of women between the ages of 18 and 39 intentionally viewed pornography in a given week. Generally, younger generations are not only more likely to consume hardcore pornography, but they are also more likely to accept pornography as morally acceptable as well. While 67% of male college students agreed that pornography viewing is, quote, an acceptable way to express one's sexuality, end quote, only 37% of their fathers felt the same way. For women, 49% of female college students agreed with that statement, compared to just 20% of their mothers. According to some sources, child exposure to hardcore pornography is also disturbingly high. Nearly 73% of children admit to having seen internet pornography before turning 18, and that number is over 90% for males. Many sources put the average age of exposure between 8 and 11 years of age, which is not surprising considering 60% of children own smartphones by age 10. According to Pornhub, in 2016 alone, people worldwide consumed 4.6 billion hours of pornographic material on their website, and the evidence is clear. Our society is watching pornography, and lots of it. Many have finally come to recognize the damage porn has on society and have begun recognizing it for what it really is, a public health crisis.
An editorial in the New York Times recently called for a ban on pornography. The Times isn't alone in wanting a crackdown on porn.
Ross Spano is a Republican member of the Florida House of Representatives. He's drafted a resolution to declare porn a public health risk.
We need to begin discussing, investigating, researching, talking about the impacts of pornography on our state.
He's not the first to propose something like it. At least 6 states have passed resolutions that say porn is a public health concern. The New York Times recently published a lengthy piece on porn and focused on a government-funded program in Boston that tries to teach high schoolers about healthy relationships and how to be critical consumers of porn.
In mid-December of 2019, 4 Republican members of the U.S. House of Representatives sent a letter to Attorney General Bill Barr calling on him to prosecute the distribution of obscene pornography on the internet and on television. The internet and other evolving technologies are fueling the explosion of obscene pornography by making it more accessible and visceral, the congressman wrote. This explosion in pornography coincides with an increase in violence towards women and an increase in the volume of human trafficking as well as child pornography. Victims are not limited to those directly exploited, however, and include society writ large. This phenomenon is especially harmful to youth who are being exposed to obscene pornography at exponentially younger ages. On the other hand, some have denied that pornography is a problem at all. A popular YouTuber by the name StixHexenhammer666 claims the idea that porn is a problem is hysterically wrong. Pornography has been around and easily accessible in movie and magazine form for almost a century. The internet merely digitizes that which already existed, just another boring moral panic. In fact, Stix believes pornography itself is natural. Here is Stix in his own words.
Let me put it this way. Here's my problem with attempting to crack down on porn. It's pragmatic. The idea that banning something makes it disappear is a time-tested way to fail. You don't make a more moral society. He's sitting here talking about the Roman Empire banning pornographic material, okay, the nude mosaics or something like that. Well, prostitution was common in the Roman Empire, including post-Christian era. There were popes that had syphilis from the prostitutes in Rome and Avignon. There were popes that were explicitly soliciting whores. There was one, and I don't know whether this is entirely true, the joust of the whores, that there was one pope who would throw chestnuts at their feet and have them grovel after them. You don't have to be a hardline atheist or atheistic at all. You could be a Christian and call that what it is. It's a form of religious hypocrisy, and it belies human biology. Biology is telling people to interact in a sexual manner. The best that we can do is hope that parents are involved, that society is healthy, and government cannot create a healthy society.
And Stix isn't alone on this one. Elizabeth Brown, an author at the libertarian magazine Reason, had this to say about pornography and the recent conservative legal backlash against it.
The government wants to talk about porn because, they get a lot of headlines from it. Even declaring it a public health crisis, even if you do that, there's no teeth to that legislation. It's just symbolic. There's actually been a lot of studies showing that people who watch porn that are adults hold more feminist views than people who don't. Teenagers today might have more access to porn that we think is scary, but they also have more access to porn that shows healthy sexuality.
Likewise, Seth Prosterman, a clinical sexologist and, unsurprisingly, a licensed therapist in San Francisco, has argued, sex has always played a super important role for human beings and their relationships. What people do sexually has always been a curiosity and of interest. And, like all good lies, there's a kernel of truth to these arguments. Pornography has always been around, and pornography appeals to our atavistic, prurient interests. Scientists have uncovered cave drawings by Australian Aborigines depicting pornographic material dated to 28,000 years ago, well before the advent of agriculture. And in the 1860s, a group of archaeologists led by Giuseppe Forielli excavated the Roman city of Pompeii, and, unsurprisingly, they uncovered loads of sexually explicit material. So much so, in fact, that their findings now have an entire Wikipedia page dedicated to them. The art they found depicted intercourse between groups of people, bestiality with goats, and even intercourse between mythical creatures like satyrs and nymphs. Furries, it seems, can trace their roots back to Rome. So yes, it is true, pornography has always existed, but the idea that porn is natural and has always existed, and therefore poses no public health concern, is misleading. Sexually explicit images have always existed, sure, but the modern delivery system of pornography is entirely new, and it is not natural in any way, shape, or form. Our brains are not equipped to cope with modern pornography. The main difference between the pornography of today and the pornography of our parents is novelty. Our lizard brains love novelty. Our love for sexual novelty has been described by something called the Coolidge effect. The Coolidge effect is an ancient biological mechanism that can override your sluggish contentment after an orgasm, if there are new mates of the opposite sex begging to be fertilized. The Coolidge effect was named after American President Calvin Coolidge, and as the story goes, President Coolidge and his wife were visiting a farm, and while the president was somewhere else, the farmer excitedly showed Mrs. Coolidge a rooster that he had owned that could copulate with hens all day, every day. Mrs. Coolidge asked the farmer to show her husband, which he happily did. President Coolidge then asked the farmer, with the same hen? To which the farmer replied, "No, sir." Tell that to Mrs. Coolidge, the president retorted. Essentially, the gist of the Coolidge effect is that our brain can get bored of repetitious sex, but if we are exposed to a new partner or environment, our tired brain can light up and get back into the action. Our brains see each new sexual activity, even those on the screen, as valuable opportunities to pass down our genetics. So our brain gets jolted into action through powerful neurochemicals like dopamine. The effect has been observed in animals, but it has been observed in humans too. Australian researchers showed human subjects the same erotic film repeatedly. During the first viewing, the subjects were very interested in what was going on, interest being measured by the subjective reports of arousal, as well as penile circumference measurements. But after each subsequent viewing, they got less and less interested. And after the 18th viewing, the researchers changed the film the subjects were watching, and the subjects' arousal sprung back up. The effect has been observed in females as well. A 2015 paper looked at 23 males and the amount of sperm ejaculated when they are faced with a novel woman in a pornographic video. As expected, the introduction of a novel woman increased the volume as well as the motility of the sperm ejaculated. And we now understand how it is novelty that makes the modern porn experience so much different and so much more dangerous than it was in the past. The internet, unlike magazines or videotapes, offers endless novelty. A magazine eventually runs out of pages. You eventually have to go back to the store, take a break, and buy another video when you get bored of watching the same film over and over. The ancient Romans would have to wait for an artisan to erect a new lewd statue or craft a new erotic pot. Whatever it was, old forms of pornography had major bottlenecks that prevented users from accessing a non-stop stream of novel sex partners. But if you're on the internet, a new novel man or woman of your liking is just a click or scroll away, all for free. In fact, in a single pornographic session, it is possible you could see as many potential sex partners of the opposite sex as our caveman ancestors would have been able to see in their entire lifetime. It is this endless, unlimited, and free novelty which allows modern pornography to flood our brain with dopamine like almost no other activity. And that, in a nutshell, is how modern internet pornography is far more addictive than its predecessors. Our brain loves dopamine. Endless sexual novelty causes our dopamine levels to explode. Internet pornography allows for endless novelty. Our brains become dependent on this dopamine, and eventually our brains get desensitized to it and require more and more pornography to reach the heights it could easily attain before. This proposed mechanism of porn addiction is persuasive, but some adamantly refuse to accept that pornography is addictive.
I'm Daniel Lenz. I'm a psychologist and a professor of communication and law at the University of California, Santa Barbara. The new research in the area of pornography doesn't substantiate the idea that pornography is addictive in any traditional sense.
Well, what's the question? My question to you is porn addictive or not? You haven't answered that question.
That remains to be seen by modern science. You can drag out. If we were to look into studies, we would find some that says it is absolutely addictive and that you're totally right. You would find others that say it's absolutely not. It's not currently under the DSM. It is not classified under any. How is that different from video games?
But saying some studies agree and some disagree, or that research suggests that pornography is not addictive, is not an accurate picture of the actual scientific landscape. It would be much more accurate to say that the vast majority of research suggests pornography can be addictive, and that the few academic porn addiction deniers present their research in a disingenuous manner by downplaying and misrepresenting their results. Author Gary Wilson has listed all 45 neuroscience papers published on the topic of porn addiction, and all of them, even the two commonly cited to have quote-unquote debunked porn addiction, are consistent with the addiction model. In fact, let's look at one of these papers that allegedly have debunked porn addiction. Steele et al. 2013 was the basis for which the infamous "Your Brain on Porn, It Is Not Addictive" article was published in Psychology Today, one of the most influential psychology publications. There have since been at least 8 peer-reviewed refutations of the Steele et al. Paper, all of which highlight glaring methodological flaws, such as subject heterogeneity, a lack of screening for mental disorders or addictions, the absence of a control group, and the use of questionnaires not validated for porn use, etc. Regardless of the flaws, unlike what the Steele et al. Authors claim, their paper actually confirms the porn addiction model, like the other 44 papers published in the literature.
So, what we need to look at a little bit to understand these two Nicole Prouse EEG studies is something called Q reactivity. This is what is often measured in trying to determine if someone's an addict in experimental studies. Now, often Q reactivity is assessed through what we call brain scans or fMRIs, and they're looking at the different parts of the brain and how much blood flow goes to these different parts. And again, they have to compare the brain activation of addicts to non-addicts. Now, Prouse didn't use brain scans. She used what are called EEGs, which are brain waves. And EEGs measure the electrical activity on the scalp. It's not even clear what causes brain waves. And the results from brainwave studies, especially for addiction, are really up to quite a bit of interpretation. So here are the EEG readings called the P300 wave. It's just one of the brain waves that Steele et al. Was assessing. So here's what it might look with an addict, a cocaine addict. They would have a much higher EEG reading for a picture of cocaine than they would for looking at a picture of a sunset, a chair, a dog, a horse, whatever. And then they say, wow, that looks like Q reactivity. You're paying more attention. Here is Steele et al., Nicole Prouse's study. The top line is porn. The second one in sort of purplish blue is sexual. This is skydiving or mutilated bodies, etc. So it was a lot higher for porn. In fact, Steele et al.'s brain activation pattern mirrors the spikes you see when drug addicts look at pictures related to their drug addiction. So look at that difference between normal and porn images. Nicole Prouse completely misrepresented her findings to the media and everyone bought it, and they still buy it today.
Prouse and the other authors that had claimed that their findings can be explained by the fact that pornography users simply have a high sexual desire is a claim that they had notably dropped in their later research, but their study actually found that pornographic users had a lower desire to have sexual relations with an actual person, but not a lower desire to masturbate. Pornography is not a complement to the real-world sexual desire. It is a twisted substitute. Porn advocates have also asked if pornography addiction leads to withdrawal symptoms.
Do we have to have a scientific study before we know whether we're addicted to like cigarettes or pornography? Do we need a scientific study to tell us that?
Does it cause withdrawal symptoms in the physical sense along the lines of tobacco?
Unfortunately, the answer is yes. At least 10 studies report withdrawal symptoms among recovering porn addicts, and sometimes even among non-addicts. Withdrawal symptoms often included insomnia, irritability, aggression, a decrease in libido, anxiety, trembling hands, depression, and more. Indeed, we know that porn addicts suffer physical consequences, such as erectile dysfunction, as a result of their porn use. A 2013 Italian paper reported 1 in 4 patients seeking help for new onset erectile dysfunction were younger than 40 years of age, with rates of severe erectile dysfunction nearly 10% higher than in men of over the age of 40. A 2012 study of Swiss men found 11% of men under age 40 suffered from premature ejaculation, and 30% suffered from erectile dysfunction. But it was not always like this. High rates of sexual problems among youth is a relatively recent phenomenon. According to Alfred Kinsey's infamous sexual research, the prevalence of ED was less than 1% in men younger than 30 years of age, less than 3% in those aged 30 to 45, and 6.7% in those aged 45 to 55, much less than the 30% reported by modern young males. Studies investigating the common ED risk factors for men have ruled out culprits such as smoking, alcoholism, obesity, sedentary lifestyles, diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and hyperlipidemia as being one of the primary causes of the increase in ED among young male populations. Less than a quarter of the recent youth ED cases have been attributed to organic trends, such as the recent decline in testosterone in male populations. Pornography is an obvious culprit for the rise of the sexual dysfunction among today's youth. As the rise of the tube sites began at about the same time, reports of sexual dysfunction among young men began to explode. Today, papers are starting to be published which demonstrate the causal link between porn use and sexual dysfunction. For many young individuals who report ED, removing pornography and changing no other variable in their life often palliates, if not totally cures, ED. A paper authored by 7 U.S. Navy physicians reviewing both individual clinical reports as well as the burgeoning academic literature from various academic disciplines concluded, quote, "Traditional factors that once explained men's sexual difficulties appear insufficient to account for the sharp rise in erectile dysfunction, delayed ejaculation, decreased sexual satisfaction, and diminished libido during partnered sex in men under 40. Terminating internet pornography use is sometimes sufficient to reverse negative effects." The evidence is straightforward. Pornography is addictive and is sexually damaging to individuals who consume copious amounts of it. And when you bring this stuff up, people say, so what? Porn might be addictive or cause sexual problems, but we can't do anything about it. Banning it would make the problem worse. People would keep using pornography anyway, and it would just shift the porn industry into the black market. This kind of lazy libertarian reasoning comes up anytime anyone points out how social liberalism is destroying our families, our culture, and our civilization. But it totally misses the point. Not only would porn restrictions be effective at reducing use, especially among minors, but it would also bring our laws closer in line with the transcendent moral order. Indeed, liberty is dependent upon adherence to the transcendent moral order, as an unvirtuous population cannot maintain liberty for long. And not only that, but a population turned into drones by pornography produced and promoted by the oligarchs is not a free population at all. It is a population enslaved by its vices and totally controlled by the elite class. Don't go outside and protest for higher wages. Don't go out and protest demographic change. Don't go out and improve your lot. Stay home, rub one out, and relax. Life is good. Does that sound free to you? The argument also assumes the legal market for pornography is in tip-top shape, but even in today's world of a relatively free and legal pornographic market, clandestine black markets in pornography still exist. Further, even the legal porn industry is awash in claims of abuse, trafficking, and rape. In fact, Pornhub has recently come under fire for how easy it is to upload videos to their site, and how easy it is for child pornographers to spread their material on their platform. All it takes to upload onto their site is an email address. You don't even need a government-issued ID. How does one become verified? You send a headshot with your username next to it, and that's it. One man was able to upload 58 videos of him abusing a 15-year-old girl onto the site before he was arrested. Pornography can also drive demand for human sex trafficking in other ways. A survey of men with 14,000 respondents found pornography consumption was positively associated with having multiple partners and engaging in paid sex behavior, even after controlling for age, ethnicity, education, and religiosity. Again, the vast majority of porn users will never engage in paid sex in their lifetime, and in fact, many addicts simply become uninterested in non-digital sexual content, and it is always possible the correlation runs the other way around. But the results are disturbing nonetheless, and shows how porn consumption and interest in human trafficking are not always two different things. Indeed, according to the Minnesota Human Trafficking Task Force, 80% of trafficking victims have experiences where a sexual exploiter asks them to imitate sexual acts from a particular pornographic video. Pornography clearly directly inspires traffickers. Not only that, but major players in the legal porn industry have recently been directly implicated in human sex trafficking. On October 10th of 2019, 2 employees and the millionaire owners of 2 major porn studios, Girls Do Porn and Girls Do Toys, have been charged with sex trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion, and conspiracy to commit sex trafficking. They are also involved in a civil case with 22 women, who claim that they were sexually exploited by the porn producers and are demanding $22 million in damages. The fact is, the legal porn industry is sketchy, very sketchy. Keeping porn legal with the intention of keeping it safe through regulation has failed. Those who wish to ban or restrict pornography recognize this, and rightfully want to try something new. The status quo never protects consumers from addiction, nor actors and actresses from exploitation. The debate over what we should do in response to the public health crisis that is pornography is just as much a philosophical debate as an empirical one. What is the role of government? No doubt most libertarian defenders of pornography believe that the purpose of government is to protect and promote liberty. But as we have noted before here at Nuclear U, the libertarian conception of liberty is simplistic. Unlimited license leads to a slavery of our own vices and needs to be restricted. As thinkers like E. Michael Jones have long noted, pornography and sexual liberation is often a tool of political control by the oligarchs. For what other reason would Israel blast hardcore pornography on Palestine's television channels after occupying the West Bank? It would be psychologically shocking, intriguing, and in some cases, addicting for the local population. Sexual addiction leads to indolence and contentment with the society the oligarchs created. As Dr. Jones is one to say, don't ask for a higher wage, don't ask questions, and go to the gay disco. If the government ought to uphold liberty, it ought to oppose open access to pornography. Moreover, why should the government promote liberty at all? Conservatives have long argued that government, first and foremost, is a source of order and a promoter of the common good. Why else should the government promote liberty other than the fact that it counts towards the common good? If liberty doesn't contribute to the common good, why would we want it? Pornography clearly is harmful to society, and that alone means that we should at least consider restrictions, or even an outright ban of pornography. And finally, there are the moral problems associated with pornography. Insofar as laws exist, they should comport with the objective and transcendent moral order. Morality and politics are not separate fields of inquiry. If objective moral values and duties exist, laws must exist in accord with them, or else our laws are immoral. This is something which differentiates conservatism from other political philosophies. We believe objective moral values exist, and that we should strive to abide by them. The ubiquity of pornography not only negatively impacts our private relationships and interactions, and not only do the negative externalities of porn use spill over, ultimately, into society at large, but it leaves an indelible mark on one's soul, giving people a misleading view of the dignity of women, the teleology of sexual intercourse and consent. Liberals constantly tell us that we should not legislate morality, while at the same time they make moral arguments for their proposals. By ceding the moral high ground to the left, conservatives consistently lose the culture war, and act surprised when things that we could say 10 years ago are political anathema today. Legislating morality is the only way forward and the only way to win. Certainly, the evidence is clear. Porn is a stain on our society. If we are to create a strong, America first, and conservative revival in this country, the issue of pornography has to be met head on. We need a serious conversation about banning porn.